Hi, this is Eva, your host from Damn Parenting. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and sure, you could write it in your calendar, but why bother? Just hit subscribe and let the app do the work for you. The robots already know your credit card number anyway, so they might as well remind you to listen too. All right, let's jump into the next episode. Welcome back to Damn Parenting. I'm your host Eva, and I'm so glad you're joining us today. Here's an unpopular opinion, and it might sting a little. The odds are stacked against us. There are studies that show expat and immigrant couples face a higher risk of divorce, sometimes as much as a third higher than couples who stay in their home countries. In some groups, or under certain conditions like intercultural marriages, integration challenges, or raising kids without the strong support systems, that risk can climb even higher. So while the exact number might vary, the reality remains. Immigrant partnerships are under pressure. When you think about it, it makes sense, right? I mean, we're parenting without any of our comfort zone, without our village, maybe with a partner from another culture, while living in a third one. So expat life or immigrant life is just not for the faint-hearted. And an expat partnership, that's even harder. The challenge, though, is that we rarely talk about this. And we don't want to stress family back home because you know that the first thing that they're going to say is just move back. And maybe we don't yet have the kind of friendships abroad where we feel safe enough to be this vulnerable. So instead, we keep it all inside. We soldier on, and the relationship struggles stay quietly in the shadows. That's why this conversation matters, because none of us are failing. None of us are broken. It's simply that the odds are stacked high, and it takes awareness, values, boundaries, and compassion to beat them. Today, I'm joined by Angela from the Expat Parenting Collective. We'll be talking about the very real challenges expat couples face, how to stay united when parenting styles clash, and how to avoid the infamous four horsemen of the apocalypse: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling that can quietly unravel even the strongest bonds. This isn't meant to be an episode for moms to secretly listen to while commuting or folding laundry. This is an episode to share with your partner, because parenting is meant to be a partnership, not one person carrying it all. So grab a coffee, maybe send this episode to your partner right now, and lean in with us, because while expat life is challenging, immigrant or expat love doesn't actually have to be impossible. Angela, welcome back to Damn Parenting.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
So this episode has actually come out of one of your posts you posted back in early August. It triggered, or it might have heightened some people's awareness around themselves, their friends, or their community. With many families facing unique stressors, cultural adjustments, distance from support systems, and raising children in unfamiliar environments, from your experience, what are the most common difficulties that put these strains on marriages and parenting partnerships abroad?
Yeah, immigrants, economic migrants, expats, this life puts a strain on our partnership. And there are some challenges. When two people are from different cultures, it means that there are two different ways, at least, of doing things. And that can also add cultural differences into communication, different ways of parenting. And it's even more complicated if these two people are living in a third culture. The second would be the loss of a support network. We have no community, no village, no friends, which equates to no emotional and practical support. And that means that they have to do everything themselves. So that's a heavy load to carry. And sometimes maybe one of the partners are taking the majority of that. And then you have identity shifts or identity loss. I would say every time we cross a border or speak a different language, there is somewhat of a shift that happens inside of us. And this can be challenged. Our identity can be challenged by having children, having to be reliant on our partner, and for some of us also not being able to work. And lastly, I would say that the last challenge could be by itself, but it also could be the accumulation of all the other challenges, which is the added stress and changes that can lead to a breakdown in communication. So those are the four major challenges that exist for most immigrants, economic migrants, and expats due to the life we live.
That's quite a lot.
Yes.
So even when parents share the same long-term goals with their kids and they often have very different ideas of how to get there, how can expat parents identify and honor their core values as a couple while still respecting differences in parenting styles?
It's a great question. And I would start by saying that many of us do not actually have a conversation about our core values or even the things that we value, period. And if you don't do that, then there is an implicit alignment or an imagined alignment. And I think that in order for us to live an intentional life, a life well lived, we need to take out that implicit and make it explicit. So that's the first thing. And I would also encourage you to do that every year. We're always changing. Our values are going to change. And it could be based on what's going on in our lives. It could be based on the changes that are happening with our children, with our careers. So yeah, talk about your values, period. That would be the first thing. The second thing, it's really important to think or talk about, I would say both, about how we were parented and how we want to parent. Then what that does is it allows for us to see our aspirational identity as parents, as well as who we may default to be in tough times. Often that's what we saw when we were children. And that is what comes up during those difficult times. So it's really great to have that conversation with our partners. And we don't have to parent in the same ways. Two people from the same culture are not going to parent in the same way. Nevertheless, two people from different cultures. So what we can do is we can help ourselves to understand where we are coming from if we talk about it. Because once again, these things have to be spoken about. They have to be spoken to. Implicit doesn't help us when we have the added challenge of expat, economic migrant, immigrant life. Life is more challenging. It must be spoken to.
It's actually funny you say that because I'm from Ireland, and in Ireland, to get married, you actually have to do a marriage course.
Yeah.
So that is kind of what you're saying there about the alignment of values and morals and the idea of how you're going to raise your children if you're choosing to do that. And I've noticed there's a lot of parenting communities here who are making people who are about to have a kid realize exactly what you spoke to there about going back to how you were raised because of those natural, how'd you say, the return to what you know best, basically, I guess how it is. And what comes along with that, I think, is also the whole reparenting element that we also have to go through, which one parent probably doesn't have to go through, but another might. And that becomes a whole extra element of a relationship that you need space for and time for to be recognized and to work on. Thank you for addressing that. And then when you speak about living overseas, blurring the boundaries, when you say crossing over thresholds or country lands, as it is, between work and family, personal space and partnerships, or even extended family back home influencing our decisions, what are some practical ways couples can actually set healthy boundaries and talk openly without fears of it becoming a source of conflict?
Yeah. First, I want to say that couples often avoid these conversations because they don't want their fears to be confirmed, or they make an assumption, positive or negatively, about the other person. And so it really, really is important, once again, to be intentional about this and to have the conversation and not make assumptions about your fears being realized or someone else's thoughts. So a good exercise is to simply talk about your boundaries and fears. I don't worry that speaking to boundaries and fears causes conflict. I worry more that couples are afraid to talk about these things. And that's really the problem that can become the growing elephant in the room. So make time to share what you're worried about and what you need to protect. It's really important to speak to these things. A boundary could be, I want to make sure that we go out on a date once a month to protect our relationship, to protect our partnership. A boundary could be that you don't want to potentially move again if you are a couple in which you may be moving frequently due to one or the other's job, or even moving schools for your child. So yeah, it's something that needs to be discussed. And there are beautiful ways in which, if you recognize that you can support each other in this way, setting kind of the boundaries of the relationship or kind of the barriers of what you can put forth, it's really a great way to help to be there for each other, to support each other.
Can I ask you a hard question? How is it that you can say, hey, I feel like we need to reconnect, or I feel like we're out of alignment, or like, is there a wording that you can use so that it's not a negative or it's not taken as criticism?
I think first, you know your life and you know your partner best, better than most. And so finding the time that you know that your partner would be most receptive. So that's first thing to keep in mind. Maybe right after someone gets home from work, or a long day or business travel may not be the best time to have this conversation. But if we address it with kindness, if we address it with love, and we say something to the nature of, I'd really like to find some time every week to connect for just 5 or 10 minutes to see how you're doing, to talk about how we're doing. And we don't need to talk about anything specifically. We don't need to address the things that are going wrong. We don't need to address the things that are going right. It could just be, you know what? This week was a really great week. And you could also, for example, taking out of the conversation of the script per se, but you could show gratitude for how your partner showed up in these moments when you have these conversations. You can celebrate the small moments. Like, you know what? I really, really think that our child is getting over X, and that's thanks to us holding space for them, you know? Or I'm really happy that we're finding time to even 5 minutes, finding time to have that 5 minute conversation. So maybe it takes a little bit of reflection about how you want to say it. However, I do think that if you approach it with kindness and love and a moment for connection, there is really nothing negative to be seen in that. I mean, there's a reason why you guys are together. There was a moment of connection or a time period that sparked this connection. And so that's really just spending time, the little time of just 5, 10, 15 minutes to really just have that moment to reconnect with each other and to talk about how things are going in your lives, which is so important for expat couples, economic migrant couples, and immigrant couples.
And just referring back to the previous questions about values and alignments, is there a question or is there some framework that we can actually work with to allow us to sit down and review and figure out our morals and our values and our dreams or aspirations? Because sometimes that's a challenge for some people to figure out, well, what are my pillars?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are lots of lists that you can find online, but I think the best question to ask yourself with a lot of these things is what makes me happy, for values. Like keep it simple. In regards to your dreams and your desires, like what is it that you dream or desire? Like we don't need to overcomplicate things. Just write a few questions for each one. And if you can find a way to break it down in very, very simple terms, that's often the best way to help us. If we find these complicated tools or tables or lists in which we potentially end up choosing something that maybe someone else's value, desire, dream, etc. I would depend more and lean more on the simplicity of things and really just asking yourself, what is it that makes me happy? What is it that I really want to do? What is it that I really desire to achieve? Just keep it simple. And then make sure that when you're asking these questions to yourself, you compare the answers with your partner and you ask questions about what that means. Two people may say that they value family, but for one, that may mean stability. And for another, that may mean adventure, or that may mean the investment of a house and 2 children and the dog, whatever it may be. So it's really important to just follow that up with asking clarifying questions. What does that mean for you? Because for me, it may mean something totally different.
That's actually quite an interesting perspective that you always think someone might give you an answer, but their answer means something different, especially with cultures where you're like, well, stability for someone from a different country can mean something completely different than what we've had.
Yeah, I think it's important not to make assumptions, especially with multicultural couples. I think that that is a route to potential issues. Not that everything is a potential issue, but because we are innately different. We're raised differently. We have different cultures. We have different customs. We were brought up in ways, parented in ways, raised, educated in ways that are different. And so it can be immensely beautiful to ask those clarifying questions to learn more about your partner that you may not know, that you may have not known, and not seeing it as like, well, you're different than I am. It's kind of a way to connect. I say curiosity is the bridge to understanding. Like you're being curious because you want to learn, you want to know more about the person. So I don't see it as like we're different. I see it as like, help me love you more, help me understand you more. And what our family is going to grow to become, because all of that is what is your family dynamic.
Do you notice with couples like that there's a key moment in their relationship, like of an age of a child? Like, do you think starting school is a massive thing for a family themselves, or?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be different for every family, especially economic migrant families, immigrant families, if they happen to move often, or expat families. It could just be that the family moves and they have this big change. But I truly believe that every family is going to be different. Some kids are going to adjust better to different moments. What a family needs to do is be present to these transitions. Transitions have a 3-step process in which you need to be able to be present through the closing, the opening, and the in-between. And the in-between is often that icky, sticky, kind of difficult, challenging time. But if we are present, we can learn so much about ourselves. We can connect with our children, which builds resilience in them. And I'll just go back with, I really think that it's different for everyone, every family. And throughout all of that, you need to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And this is where it comes into the hobbies and the passions and the connecting with what is best for me right now. And, making sure to make that time for you, whether it's the mindful cup of tea, whether it's going for the walk, whether it's going to the dance class, the Aikido class, it runs the gamut. Everyone's different. But you really need to take care of yourself as a parent when times are tough. And often this is the time where people don't because things are busy and tense and it's really needed. You have to take care of yourself through these times. And it could be going to the exercise class because that's how we let go of stress.
You're talking about taking care of ourselves, which obviously is a form of kindness. You actually mentioned in your post about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. How can our international families here practice kindness and compassion in their daily interactions so that they can prevent those patterns and keep their relationship strong?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the first thing that I would say is acts of kindness and acts of generosity. This doesn't have to be some grandiose gift of going to the spa or a spa weekend, although those are great. It doesn't have to be so grandiose. It could be that you let your partner sleep in. It could be that you decide to pause their favorite TV show because they're putting the kids to bed that night and it's taking a little bit longer. Putting the kids to bed for your partner when it's their night to put the kids to bed. Or maybe you always do it, but the other one can take up a step in for you because you need a night just to have 5 minutes to yourself. Kindness is contagious. And if we think about it, these things happen really, really, really frequently when we're early on in love. We do things for each other. They could be small gifts or small ways in which we show appreciation. But as things get tough and our love sprouts in different ways because it's children instead of just the love between us two, those responsibilities kind of fade away these acts of kindness and generosity. So kindness is contagious. If you do those things, it usually sprouts more of them. Second would be your partner's human. Maybe they forgot about an important appointment or thing that needed to be done. But most times they're not doing these things intentionally. It just kind of happens. Maybe they're stressed about something that's going on at work or something else came up. And we can have compassion and understanding for this if we keep in mind that they are human and these things do happen instead of assuming the other. The last thing is really, really listen to your partner. I think oftentimes in the world that we live in these days, we either are immersed in our phones or some other thing that's distracting us. And so if we really listen to them, and this could be the activity I described before, where every week, you kind of meet with each other and you have that check-in. If we really listen to each other, people feel loved, they feel heard, they feel seen. And there's an activity in the MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction program, in which people sit in front of each other and they listen to each other for 3 minutes. And people feel so connected. And then there's an activity after in which the person who's listening just doesn't listen at all. And people feel destroyed, disconnected. The list of adjectives goes on. But really, just fully paying attention, active listening, it's something so small and it's so rare these days. So those are three things that I think that we could do to show kindness and compassion to our partners. And these are great examples that set a path and an example to our children of just basic things that can be done even by them with their friends, but also which will develop to be how they treat other people when they get older, their future partners, their future children, etc.
Something I do want to ask, and this is because, well, as we've mentioned before we started recording, was there's a lot of relationship turmoil and divorces and separations happening within our own circles. We're talking here about trying to save or trying to nourish or trying to replenish relationships. Can I ask you about a partner who might feel already resentful? How can we bring them up to a baseline where they're able to actually actively do the work that you're saying without sitting still in that resentment?
Yeah. What needs to really be looked at is to why that resentment is there. And there are many different reasons as to why that resentment is there. And this could be too much of the load. This could be they had to give up their career. This could be that they shut down at a certain point. And in these moments, I would say that a neutral third party is required. And this could be a coach. This could be a psychologist, a therapist. I would say that one could also talk to a friend that they really trust, as long as they understand this expat, immigrant, economic migrant experience. And you could start there and just be like, you know what? I just need you to listen, I just need you to listen to me. I'm really struggling at the moment. And if you just listen, I will feel better just to get it off my chest and maybe even think through it. So that's what I would say in regards to helping that person to return to baseline, because that connection is what's going to help that person get to repair that. But you need to talk to someone to get through that. And whether it's a good friend that you can rely on to just give you that ear and not say anything and maybe a hug in the end, or you can also move on to a coach or a mental health care practitioner who understands this potentially multicultural experience, but also the experience of living the life that we live as expats, economic migrants, and immigrants is very important. That I would say is definitely important. That last qualifier of understanding the life that we live.
Okay, well, this has been quite a powerful conversation, and it's obviously one that is never really spoken about. It's such a unique not unique topic, but it's unique for us with our specific, as you say, the expats, the economic migrants, the immigrants, and everyone else that's involved here. So thank you for joining us and sitting with us to talk through this. If you were going to walk away with one thing, let it be this. Strong relationships, they just don't happen. They're the result of everyday choices. Choosing to communicate, even when it's uncomfortable. Choosing kindness over criticism. Choosing to keep showing up for each other. Whether that's through a proper date night, as Angela recommended, or just those 5 to 10 minutes, she said, without those phones or dishes or the kids climbing over you. Our life will always test us. We're raising our kids across cultures without our old support networks and trying to figure out what's home and what it really means. But the key is, we don't have to do it alone. Relationships take effort from both partners, yes, but they also take a community. And that's where we come in. Because here's the thing, there are plenty of podcasts and articles all about relationships. But this space, what Damn Parenting represents, what the Expat Parenting Collective provides, it's specific to us, to international families, to people creating new lives far from their homelands, raising kids abroad, and piecing together a multicultural village that feels like home. That's what makes this conversation different. It's ours. So here's my invitation. Don't just keep this episode to yourself. Share it with your partner. Share it with a friend who might be struggling and hasn't said it out loud. Share it with anyone who needs a reminder that they're not alone. Because we are part of your village. And sometimes the bravest step is simply being willing to have the hard conversations. Together we can create a beautiful landscape to learn, grow, and find joy in our new homes. So thank you for listening. And thank you again to Angela from the Expat Parenting Collective. Until next time, take care of yourselves, your family, and your partnerships. We're in this together.